so you'll need one of the mics.
I need to hold the mic as well, right?
Probably, yeah, use the good one. I'll steal this one.
Testing. Okay.
Can you all hear that? Amazing. All right, we're going to get started. First of all, happy Valentine's Day. How's everybody doing?
I love you too, Mate.
I love you, man. It's good to see so many familiar faces. Thank you for coming. It's very exciting. We'll have a little special treat for you all after the presentation. It's going to be a surprise. You're probably wondering what it is, but I'm not going to tell you. Instead, I'm going to tell you a bunch of boring stuff that I always say before the talk. Please bear with me. So my name is Mate. I work for Braid as a software engineer. They're helping us organize this meetup, so we're very thankful. The presentation is going to be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel, so please stay tuned and spread the word. Feel free to help yourself to some food that's going to arrive as soon as we're done with the presentation. Spoiler alert, it's going to be pizza. I hope you like pizza. And then if you're not in a rush, once we're done devouring all the pizza and socializing, please help us restore this area to its original state with the tables in neat rows and everything. And as always, please enjoy the presentation, and I'll come and talk to you once we're done and we're enjoying pizza. Cool. Please give a very warm welcome to Elizabeth, who's one of my coworkers.
Hello, just give me a moment to get set up. You want to take your laptop? Arigato. Thank you. Oh. All right, hopefully you can see that and we can see the code. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to get started. All right, yeah, cool. Hi, so I'm Elizabeth Oda. I am a researcher at Braid with Mate. And today I'm going to be talking about building command line tools in Rust. So first, before we get started, just a little bit about me. So like I said, I work at Braid. I joined in January along with several other awesome people. I'm also a co-founder of Women in Science Japan. The mission of our organization is to help women scientists in Japan reach their full potential through professional development events and networking opportunities. I'm also a Lewagon Tokyo data science graduate. Can you raise your hand if you have some relationship to Lewagon? There's a lot, yeah, cool, awesome. So talk to those people. And I'm also a plant biology nerd, so I did my master's in molecular biology. So you can see me looking like a dork in front of a $500,000 microscope. Like to hike, previously lived in Hawaii for several years. And yeah, you can see some of the many members of Women in Science Japan. Can you raise your hand if you have some relationship to Women in Science Japan? Maybe? Okay. Yay, Mate too. Cool. Okay. All right. So today I'm going to be talking about why Rust, just very briefly because many of you in this room have actually never used Rust before. So I want to give a very, very high-level overview of that. But the focus is really going to be developing a command line tool, and I'm going to demo it. Hopefully everything works. And then I'll talk a little bit about the joys and challenges of learning Rust after Python. So I mentioned that I am a Lewagon Tokyo graduate, and I have started learning Python back in October 2021. And prior to that, didn't have a lot of computer science experience, and just started learning Rust maybe December 2022, seriously. So bear that in mind when you watch my presentation, and when you're asking questions, please be kind. Okay, and yeah, I want to talk about leveraging the Rust community here and online, and then obviously time for questions. So Lots of people have lots of opinions about why Rust is a good language, and you're welcome to argue about these with me after. But these are my kind of perspectives, and I think you'll see many people agree with this online. When Rust is used correctly, it's roughly as performant as C or C++. Generally, Rust is more memory safe than C and C++. And Rust is more popular, or I should say growing in popularity relative to those languages because of some of its easy-to-use tooling. If you use Rust, almost certainly use Cargo, other tools like Clippy. But Rust is not perfect for everything, though there might be some people in this room that would disagree. So Rust has some strong opinions about memory safety that can make you a little bit frustrated as you're trying to build something. If you're coming from a language like Python, Rust is not object-oriented in the same way you think about objects in Python, and that's intentional. In my opinion, also, Rust is a little bit slower for prototyping. Again, if you're maybe a little sharper than me, maybe it's not a big deal. But I think these are maybe some reasons why not to use Rust. OK, what is a command line tool, right? So command line tools are really for software developers or people working from the command line that are trying to solve a specific problem, usually using some kind of input from the command line interface. So when I started learning how to actually code, right, going into the command line felt a lot like this, right? I'm like, heck, man, I'm in. But once you start to use the command line, you find yourself maybe making mistakes or looking for ways to streamline your workflow. So correcting user mistakes is a really big reason to use a command line tool. Faster searching, using the command line, improving readability or accessibility. Are there any other command line tool categories people know of? Vim. OK, so there are actual editors in the command line.
Project setup tools are really common.
Project setup tools?
Setup tools.
Setup tools. Project setup tools.
If anyone's done Ruby on Rails, right?
OK, yeah. So Brian says if you've done Ruby on Rails, right, you'll be familiar with project setup tools in the command line. Great. OK, so for those who are faint of heart, sorry, there's a little bit of cursing in this presentation. But there's a very, very popular command line tool called the fuck. And the fuck is being demonstrated here, right? So what it's doing is it's correcting command line mistakes. So you can kind of see, oh, git brunch, OK. Did you mean that? You type in fuck. It gives you the correct command and does the command for you. So really simple, but as you can imagine, this might streamline your work if you are like many of us who are making a lot of typos. So this is essentially what I recreated. Right? So why would I recreate this tool that's already really popular and widely used? A few reasons. So my goal was to learn Rust, right? My goal was not to learn an entirely new field of science while learning Rust or something like that, right? So I wanted to pick something that I could make really concrete, the steps that I would need for development. Two, I wanted to build something I'd actually use. The fuck is a really fun tool to have in your arsenal in the command line. And I wanted to build something in Rust. And then finally, I wanted to build something small that could be scalable. As you can imagine, you can start with a few really basic programs and then add in more complex commands. So I thought this was a good project for me to start with. There were some more interesting or maybe more complicated projects out there, but I think I'm happy with the choice to recreate this. I gave it a slightly more family-friendly name. I called it the heck. So I'm going to be introducing the heck, my command line tool, which is basically inspired by the fuck, but in Rust. So again, just to kind of break down how this is actually working, so we have to take the last line of the history file. And this is going to give us the command that was incorrect, where there was some kind of typo either in the program name or the arguments for that program, maybe both. Very simply, it's going to check whether the program is known. I'll talk about how that actually happens. If the program name is known, it's going to try to fix the argument somehow. If the program name is not known, it's going to go back, try to fix the program name first, then go back and try to fix the argument if it's wrong. So I also allow the user to confirm that the command is correct, just like the tool you saw before. And then it actually runs the command and displays the output. So pretty much like what you saw for the previous tool, but perhaps not as robust just yet. So as you can imagine, there are a lot of possible strings that you could try to have to fix. And it can be really difficult to have a massive list of all possible strings that you meant to implement. So we use something called a fuzzy search, right? Has everyone here heard of a fuzzy search before? See a lot of nods. Some people shaking their head. OK, so right, the goal of a fuzzy search is to take a string that has some unknown value, right? And to, well, I should say has some part of it that is incorrect for what you're trying to do, and to match it against using some kind of algorithm, possible potential strings, and then narrow down the list. So in this case, we're using an algorithm that's based on something called the Levenshtein distance, or the Levenshtein automata. And the Levenshtein distance is very simply just the minimal distance between two words, including insertions, deletions, and substitutions. And the automata actually returns strings that are less than some n distance from the query. So you need to predefine that when you're making your automata. But yeah, that's very high level. Let's do a nice Valentine's Day themed example, right? So this is our original word, Valentine, and we want to compare the distance, the Levenshtein distance between Valentine and some other words, right? So Valentino, the Levenshtein distance is just 1, right? We're just changing the last letter, O, to an E to get back to Valentine, right? Again, Aletine or Alentine, however you want to say that, has a Levenshtein distance of 2 from the word Valentine, and Valent has a Levenshtein distance of 4. Hopefully that's clear. So, keeping with this example here, we've got a Levenshtein automaton for Valentine. So it's only going to consider words that are within a distance of n equals 2. Which of these words here would actually be recognized by this automaton, if any? So we've got galantine, valentine, and lentil. Who votes for galantine? Recognized. Okay. Who votes for valentine? Slightly fewer hands, mostly. Okay. Lentil. Okay. So from my calculations, galantine definitely, right? Because we can just change the G to a V. And then valentine, I believe, should fit, right? Because the maximum distance is 2. We can add an E, or an N, sorry, between E and T, and add an E at the end, so 2. So obviously, if I had to implement this algorithm from scratch, that would have extended the project quite a bit. Thankfully, there are some really brilliant people who have solved this problem before. And in fact, one of them was a former speaker here at the Tokyo Rust Meetup, Paul Masserell, who is a co-founder at QuickWit. So for those of you who were here for his search, definitely you know that he's an expert in this topic about speed and optimizing this search algorithm. And actually, organically, I came across this post that he wrote. So if you really want to dive into the topic and how he actually developed the algorithm for his search software, I definitely recommend checking out that blog post. It's also a fun little blast from the past because it's from 2015, so you can see how his thinking has evolved since then. Okay, now for the scary part. We're going to do a live demo. Woohoo! All right. So as I mentioned, the goal of this thing is to correct command line arguments, right? So let's clear this. Okay, so this is going to be hard to type while I do this, but I'm going to write, let's say, get stats. I actually type this by accident quite often, right? That's not going to work. But if I type heck, did I mean status? I did. And you can see it corrects the command for me behind the scenes and then actually gives me the output of what get status would be. So that's kind of nice. That's kind of what I expected, right? What about cargo? Because we're talking about Rust. So if I want to do cargo, let's see, FMM. Do people know what the, oh, thank you. Yes, hold on. Is that better? Okay, thank you, sorry. So this cargo FMM, I'm meaning to type something else here, right? This is going to fail. And again, just heck, it fixes it. And if my code were poorly formatted, you would have noticed that it was reformatted, right? this is pretty limited in its current form, right? I can't handle everything. I'll give you, let's see, an example. Corgo FMT. Okay? This should break. Okay, so it's thinking it's FMT, right? It's not recognizing this Corgo. Yeah, so I get this panic, right? And the reason being, and I'll show you why, basically I am able to handle things that fix the argument. I'm having some trouble fixing a bug that actually resolves the program name itself. Maybe you can help me if you want to be a contributor. But anyway, this is really basic. This is essentially how it works. It's hopefully what you anticipated based on what you saw before. So generally, when we're thinking about Rust, we have a main.rs, a lib.rs, and then maybe different modules separated into different files, right? So doing my best to keep things really simple, let's see if I can make this smaller. Okay, that's basically the command, right? So I try to keep all of the heavy lifting outside of main. I think that's how I'm supposed to do it. You can see all of my really lazy print bug debugging here still in artifacts. But you can get kind of a general flow based on the outline I gave you before, right? Get the history, the path of the history file, get the last command, split it into the program name, the arguments, fix it using this function called corrector. It to the command line interface. Okay, so lib, right? Corrector, all of this code is public, by the way. If you wanted to go and look at it, please feel free to go to my repo. But just to give you, again, kind of an idea of what's happening here. One thing you'll notice, for those of you that are more experienced with Rust, there's maybe some not so ideal handling of strings. This is still something I'm trying to figure out. Yeah, I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail. Also, some things trying to go from, thinking of a very Pythonic way of like testing something within a vector and it not really playing that nice with how Rust wants to work. I think this would be much better as an if-let based on what I know. But anyway, let me see. The fix command, this is really the thing that's doing the heavy lifting, right? And this is based on that Levenshtein automata, right? So it's taking the wrong command as a string, taking possible commands from down below. Here, really, you're just taking the Levenshtein, creating a Levenshtein automata with automaton with a maximum distance of 2, searching from the set of possible commands, and then returning it. And those possible commands are way down here. Is just a simple match, right? So if the program name is git, these are the possible commands that are handled. You'll notice kind of an outlier here. This ls just automatically fixes to sl automatically goes to ls. And you can see some of the commands here that are handled for cargo. Yeah. OK, and then finally, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but the history path. There's a really nice crate for those of you who are having to work with history files called revbuffreader, and that made it a lot easier for me to actually get the last line from the history file as a certain number of bytes, and then just parse that into a vector that I could manipulate. Cool. All right, hopping back to the presentation for a bit. Where am I? OK. All right. So I want to talk just a little bit about how I approach this, because again, I was new to the language. It can be kind of intimidating to dive into a language without a real path forward. So again, I chose this because I could think about the steps in a pretty clear way. So I started by actually just creating an outline of this in pseudocode, and then just doing the easiest kind of low-hanging fruit first. Right? So getting the last line of the history file, fixing the commands manually without any fuzzy search, just giving it commands that were kind of prescripted, like ones that I could prepare for, and fix them that way, just to test the input-output kind of abilities of my program. Then finally incorporating this fuzzy search, and then finally the sort of CLI that you saw at the end. Okay. As you can imagine, there's still a lot to do. So I actually use Zish and not Bash. So if you wanted to use this tool with Bash, you would be in trouble right now. So it actually shouldn't be that much of a change. But I think the way that the actual timestamps are managed in Bash versus Zish is different. So it's not just a matter of finding the right file path name. But it shouldn't be too hard to add. That would be the next kind of low-hanging fruit feature to add in that would benefit and expand to a lot more users, right? Better handling of git commands. So when you run a git command, other than maybe like git status and git log, you almost always have some kind of indication of the file that you're trying to work with, right? Git add this file, or git remove, or git commit with some kind of message, right? So this program doesn't handle that all that well right now. I can handle really basic things that require no additional input from the user. But it's a good start for things that are pretty common anyway. Add support for additional programs. Can anybody recommend some like nice, easy programs that could be incorporated into this tool without a lot of complexity that they use regularly?
A simple suggestion would be, instead of giving you a list, just check what is in user bin.
Great. Yeah, so for those in the back, Jacobo said, instead of checking from a list, check from user bin, which is in fact what most of these kinds of tools do. And that is a much more sophisticated way of doing this rather than writing a pre-created list, right? Yeah, I think that would be a next good step. Any other ideas, suggestions on other programs, or like Jacobo added, maybe other suggestions? Yeah, Brian.
I use the cat command a lot.
Okay, cat command, yeah.
It's really simple because it's just cat file name.
That's a good one. Yeah, cat command, yep.
Sorry for double interrupting, but maybe there's a way of parsing the run file instead of having access to all the arguments.
Say that again, parsing the man file to have access, yeah, definitely. I think I'll share some resources at the end that are actually other command line tools built in Rust, and you can kind of see how other people or other groups have kind of tackled this problem. I think shell bash or Zish history is a really common way. Looking at the man file, looking through that. Yep. Yeah.
So aren't there like bash completions? It has a bunch of things in a programmatic format. You could just read all those arguments and all that other stuff. Flip them into your hack program.
Yeah, so the question was, are there bash completion programs that you could kind of, I don't know, use as a reference for this program? Yeah, definitely. And I think I use one with Zish, which is like autocomplete. And that's very helpful and streamline things. But sometimes I still, instead of pressing tab, make typos. But yeah, I think that could be used as a good reference as well. And I don't know, do you have an intuition as to what files they might be looking at?
I don't know what format they're in.
Okay, you didn't want to put you on the
Easier
spot.
than going to man pages, which are all different.
Okay, fair. Okay. Yep.
I guess one suggestion too is like a lot of command line tools don't have, and especially ones that are third party, don't have man pages, but they typically by default have either -h or -help to get like a list of commands, and you could probably, well, not just list of commands, you have to parse it, but because it's human readable output. But
yeah.
Anyway, that could be another source of finding like the options.
Good. Okay, so to repeat what Brian said, he said some like third-party tools don't have man files, but what you could do instead is to like parse the help or /help for these tools. I think that's a good idea. Could get complicated, I think, very quickly, but I like that. That's a creative one. Cool. Any other kind of thoughts or things to add to this? Cool. We'll keep going. Okay, so once you make something in Rust, you can actually publish it and share it with the world. Can I get a show of hands of how many people have published something to Crates.io before? 1, 2, 3, okay, 4 people. Okay, so not actually that many. I don't want to do a very long demo, but I want to just show you a couple of the things that helped me in getting this done because I did it literally last night. So it's definitely not a very stressful task. So I know you can do it. But let me point out a couple little quirks that I encountered. So the package name itself is called the heck, and you have to have all this other information in your cargo.toml for it to work on crates.io, right? Nice to have a description. You need to make up some version, right? And that has to change every time you republish it, which obviously makes sense, but something to keep in mind. This edition is something related to Rust and not something related to the actual year we're in. So yeah, assuming you've already managed your dependencies properly, which you should have, there are some additional functions you can add. So I didn't want to have to write the heck every time I ran this program because that basically defeats the purpose, right? So I basically told it where to look in the bin for this command called heck and just pointed it back to my main. Maybe there's a more elegant way to do that, but it worked for me. Yeah, and so this, I think, is a pretty critical part. Another one is that even though you might have your README in the directory above, cargo publish cannot find that by default. There might be a way to point it, but I didn't find that. So I actually have a duplicate of my README. So yeah, there might be another way, but just keep in mind if you publish it without a README in the right spot, even though you have one, it's not going to show up on crates.io. But yeah, other than that, it should be a pretty easy process for you, and there's a nice little guide in the cargo manual that walks you through how to do this. And yeah, it's available already. If you wanted to use this version, you can see the list of commands that are currently supported. You can see an example of what it does. Really not helping you too much with installation, sorry, assuming that you know how to install Rust and Cargo. But yeah, okay, yeah?
There's a newer command. You can write cargo install, and it will install the binary, and it's automatically in the path, and you can just run it.
Yes, so
Yeah.
with cargo install, it will build the binary for you, but you have to specify a path now for cargo install, at least in my version of cargo. So when I tried cargo install without any path, it wasn't happy with that. So I had to specify it to the path where I had my cargo.toml.
Oh yeah, if it's on crates, you can do that. So you just published it in crates yesterday, right?
Yeah.
So it should work now.
Okay, so maybe Brian's saying if I try cargo install now, it'll work. I thought I saw another hand. Yeah.
I mean, can you go back to the toggle thing?
Uh-huh.
I just want to ask, like, so the bin, so for example, if you have like multiple commands, so how do you make the like pointing? So the main, like that's the command name, right? And it's pointing to the main.rs.
Yep.
So if you have like say heck2, so how do you like multiple commands in the same one?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you have multiple commands that you want to execute, how can you do that with bin? I believe I could just add another name, heck2, path, source to a different file. I haven't tried it with the same file. That seems like it might cause some issues, but maybe not. But yeah, I think you can just add as many as you want here as long as it has an associated file.
So does it, so main.rs, does it like point to the main function?
Yes. Yes, so this is actually running my main function. If let's say you had some separate function, so yeah, if there was some another function that you had that you wanted to do some alternative processing with this, let's say you wanted a version that automatically ran the command for you, right? Without saying any, without your confirmation, you could have that like main, push automatically, right, and direct it there. Cool. Any other questions? Okay, great. Hopping back here. Okay. All right. So just a quick aside. So for those of you who have tried to publish on Crates.io before, you might have encountered that the name you wanted was already taken. Okay, so I obviously wasn't going for this name because my tool has a different name, but I saw that this was taken. Not only is there no README, this doesn't exist, you can't download it or use anything with it. And this person has done this for 104 of these. So I have a bone to pick with this person. I hope it's no one in the room. But if you have any suggestions on how we can, I don't know, combat this, because I think it's really not healthy for the Rust ecosystem for people to sit on names. Yeah.
I think you can go on Crates, and you can Crates.io, and you can report the package.
All right, so Monte says we can go on Crates.io and report the package. I might be reporting some packages tonight. Okay.
You have to go on 104 packages.
Yeah, there's a lot.
Command line to do it for you.
Ah, yes, exactly. I heard two suggestions. Write a command line tool to do it for you. I like your thinking there. Okay, so as I mentioned, I'm new to the tool, new to Rust, and thankfully there's a really good community here in Tokyo of people learning Rust. So Brian reached out after he heard that I was going to be presenting at the next meetup. He was like, curious to see how you're finding Rust. And yeah, when you first start learning something for the first time, it's really exciting to get that like hello world feeling. That faded pretty quickly, unfortunately. So even just like a couple weeks ago, I was already asking for help around basically dealing with some borrowing and some lifetimes from some more experienced Rustaceans. As to getting their opinions on what is going wrong, how can I do this in a more canonically Rust way. So yeah, to that point, as I mentioned, I don't really have a computer science background, so I haven't learned C before. I haven't learned any of those maybe slightly lower level languages. And so truly understanding how ownership and borrowing and references and all that works takes a little bit of time. You can gloss over that in Python, but actually understanding what's happening, in terms of managing and storing information, yeah, that was challenging at first, and I'm still not 100% over that hill, I think, to be perfectly honest. I also wanted to code things in the way that I do them in Python. And this often kind of resulted in making macros that made vectors behave like they did in Python, which is just really not the point of learning the language, right? So I had to kind of basically start from maybe not square one, but square two with my code and try to really think, okay, what can I do in a more proper way with Rust? And finally, this last one is kind of a small detail, but it actually makes a big difference when you're developing. Just actually being aware of all the tools that are out there. One of my colleagues looked over and was like, you don't have Rust Analyzer installed? And so just knowing that these things exist, outside of maybe just reading the book front to back, can make a big difference. So there are some joys though. So does anybody here only know Python? Yeah, I think there are a few people here who only know Python, right? So learning Rust after Python can sound a little bit scary. I might have made it seem kind of scary, hopefully not too scary. But actually, I think this is really good. If you plan to continue in software development or in tech more broadly, developing a stronger understanding of computer science is really important, I think. And Rust is a really nice gateway into getting into that world. That'll open up different avenues for you, not just in terms of languages, but the kinds of work you can actually do as a software developer. Maybe not even a software developer. Also, yeah, I think there are certain problems that just shouldn't be tackled with Python. And having another tool that, even though I'm not an expert in it yet, but another tool that I can use to maybe try to tackle that problem, I think is a good improvement and something I want to keep developing. So I'm going to wrap up pretty soon, but I just want to point out, if you wanted to build a command line tool of your own, there are a couple things I found really helpful. For those of you who don't know, there's something called the Rust book. If you just Google the Rust programming book, it'll be like the first link. And chapter 12 actually gives you an example of building an I/O project for the command line, which is perfect. This is where I started. This really helped me understand how to kind of structure files and how to think about it. I have a link in the last slide for a really long list of command line tools that are built in Rust that you might find some inspiration from. And some of them I think might be used commercially. Some of them are totally open source, but you can take a look. There's one more amazing resource that I'm really excited to announce today. And we have a Tokyo Rust Discord server. And so for those of you that are interested in Rust and want to keep being a part of this community and want to help us grow this community, I would really encourage you to join. That being said, it's not in a secret or a private group by any means, but we do want to make sure that the people that join early are really invested in helping us build this community. So if you want, there will be a couple QR codes to join floating around, but you might have to ask us for them. But of course, Mate, myself, and maybe some others, maybe Brian, who's already in the group, can help you get involved. And with that, I'm going to wrap up. I want to say thank you for coming out, and thank you for listening to my talk. Do we have any questions? Okay. None at all? Crystal clear? Amazing.
I have one question.
Yeah.
So, as I understood, this was your first project, right, last year. What was the most annoying aspect of this?
Yeah, so his question was, what was the most annoying aspect of doing this in Rust? So I think it's strings, like specifically strings. So I kind of jokingly called them big strings and little strings. So there's like a capital string, and then there's a lowercase string, typically with a reference, right? Again, this kind of goes back to my frustration with borrowing and lifetimes. Moving that information between different functions and then trying to get it back often caused some heartache for me. Yeah, that was the most challenging part, very specifically. Yeah?
I'm curious if you've had the opportunity to try to work with hash maps in Rust yet.
Brian asked if I've had the opportunity to work with hash maps in Rust yet. No, but now I'm scared.
That's my frustration.
Yeah?
You mentioned it's like deliberately not object-oriented. Is that right? Do you know why that is?
Yeah, so she asked why it's deliberately not object-oriented. Well, there's a couple things. So one is that traits are statically, I'm looking at Mate here to
dispatched.
Yes, they're statically dispatched, right? And other things too, you're kind of pushed to use enums instead of things like, say, like an object that you would pass throughout Python. Also, it doesn't support inheritance like it does in Python. So, yeah, that's my answer. People are giving me some kind of funny faces. Do you disagree?
You can dynamically dispatch.
You can do dynamic dispatch. Okay.
It's an option.
It's an option. Is that okay?
It's still not quite object-oriented because you can't really get the original type back very easily, nor you can tackle something.
Okay, so just to summarize, even though it is dynamically, you can have a dynamic, what we say, traits? Dispatch, sorry, dynamic dispatch. You might not be able to get the same trait type back. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Yeah?
How was testing and debugging the CLI part?
Ooh, testing and debugging the CLI part. So you saw my really nice print statements. That was where I started. Yeah, no, I basically, there was, at this stage, no real testing other than just kind of make one fix, try it. Make one fix, cargo run. Make one fix, cargo run. Obviously, that is not how I would develop code that would be going to production. But for the sake of just learning and trying to understand what small tweaks happen, it's okay for now.
So cargo run is enough to get your
Cargo run was enough for me in this case, but cargo test would be a much, much better approach moving forward. If I write some better, smart tests.
So since one of the tools is to add tests, so I'm assuming it's unit tests for the tool.
Yeah.
So like, have you come across any testing frameworks which are like very available, which you're planning to use? What's your approach for testing, or what's your approach gonna be for testing?
Yeah, so the question was whether I have come across any frameworks that would be good for testing or what my approach would be for testing. Specific frameworks, no, but I think with these types of things, you try to think of edge cases. So what about strings that are equally, have the same Levenshtein distance? How does the program handle that, for example? Or if you have a bug that I already know, is that if you have only one argument, how does the program handle that? Or if you have an argument that's a space, how will it handle that? Should it even run? So just trying to think of edge cases where it would break. Not the most systematic approach, but definitely I should look into some frameworks. Cool, anything else? All right, well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. And I hope you'll find either Mate or I to get some info about joining the Discord. Yeah.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was a great presentation. I feel like I learned something about this terrible person splitting things on crates.io. Let's all go and report his crates, or her crates, who knows. So you completely stole all my thunder by answering the questions that I usually ask people when they're up here with me about what they like and what they dislike and what was difficult about picking up Rust. So I'm just going to come up with some new questions on the fly. Let's see. What are some, so you are coming from Python, right? That's like your main language that you use day to day?
Yes.
Have you used another language before Python?
Yeah, good question. So in college, I took a semester of Java, and I took a semester of MATLAB. I don't really remember much of it, but I think somewhere deep in the recesses of my brain, like the object-orientedness helped me learn Python later. But that's basically it outside of some really, I don't know, bad macro scripting that I used in biology.
What are some things that you miss from Python? Either tools or features, differences in the workflow?
That's a good question. So I think in Python, I tend to do a lot of prototyping quickly, and so I'm not aware of like an equivalent of, say, like Jupyter Notebook and Rust. I don't know that there would really be one based on how you use Rust, but perhaps. I also was kind of interested in a debugger, kind of like breakpoint in Python, and to my knowledge, there is one, I think, in nightly Rust, but it's very poorly documented. So you have to use maybe some alternative approaches that aren't so friendly to Rust. But again, that might be a reflection of my resistance to doing things in a Rust way. And yeah, not appreciating the great tools already available for the language.
So I think since the food is here, thank you. I'm going to stop asking you questions. Who's hungry? We have a minor technical issue, which is we forgot to order plates. Please use your hands and be kind of careful. New York style fold, if anybody knows what I'm talking about. And if you are interested in actually contributing to any of these Rust projects, please come drop by the Rust Discord server. And maybe Elizabeth will turn these great ideas that some of you had tonight into actual issues. And then I think, I personally think maybe it's like a little too intimidating to start a project from scratch, but contributing to an already existing one is more fun. And a lot of us are going to be there on the Discord server. We have like basically 24/7 Rust help. You can ask us questions. I'm kind of a night owl, so if you're up late at night and you have a question about Rust, don't hesitate to just ping me, and maybe I'll help. Maybe I won't be able to help, and then we will both learn something. All right. That's a wrap for tonight. Thank you all for coming, and again, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Enjoy pizza and special treats. Anything else that I'm forgetting?
you usually ask what we would want to see at the next
Oh,
Rust
that's
Talk.
right. I totally forgot. Okay, I'm so sorry. So what would you like to see as the next project?
So
Next presentation.
I thought about this a little bit. So one of the things that I've used Python for is machine learning or AI, and Rust is fast. Maybe it could be helpful for that. I think there would be some major roadblocks, but I did stumble across a Rust-based machine learning tool. So if anybody is interested in doing some machine learning with Rust, I'd be really curious to hear how you did it, what the challenges were, maybe even contribute a little bit. So
that's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. We had like a lot of good things. We had some like distributed string search. We had full stack web development, right? And we had property-based testing. We definitely did not have machine learning. Another interesting topic I think could be embedded development, which supposedly Rust and C-like languages excel at. Also game development. I think the game dev Rust community is kind of picking up steam. They have a lot of interesting crates. So if you happen to have a hobby project in any of these areas or any other area, please don't hesitate to send us a message. It is you all who make this meetup happen. If we don't have a presenter, then we would not be here. So thank you, Elizabeth, for volunteering.
of course. All right, let's eat.
Cool. Enjoy the pizza.